Hi, welcome to my YouTube. Today I'm going to show you how to modify a drum sight and install a mini claw rail onto your 16. The MP5 has several distinct features, and these are two of them, the front sight and the rear sight. No conversion is complete without installing a drum sight. The following is the evolution of the GSG-16 sights. Its predecessor, 5, looked identical to the MP5. It has a front round sight, no front rail, no back rail, and a rear drum sight. This was subsequently replaced by the 522, which changed the front sight to two parallel ears, no front rail, they added a back rail, and they left the rear drum sight alone. Subsequent to that, finally, that was replaced by the 16, which then changed the last remaining features. They added the front rail, and they unfortunately changed the back drum sight to this cheap ass rear sight, which I don't particularly like. The conversion kit included the front sight, but no drum sight. So I had to source one of these from the airsoft world. And to mount them, there was a few issues to overcome, beginning with this back rail mount. It's permanent on the receiver, so it's going to stay like the 522. There are other hurdles to overcome too, so let's begin. Okay, I'm back. So why don't we compare these sights and talk about the differences and the issues I face. Okay, this is the 16 front sight. It's made out of plastic compared to alloy, so this is heavy. The 16 has two parallel ears, or wings if you want to call them wings. The one from the kit is round, a lot easier to use with aperture. This is rather difficult to use with aperture. I find it quite difficult. The tube is skinnier from the kit. The one here is bigger, thicker. It's also, the charging handle is ambidextrous. And because this tube is thicker, it creates an issue. The first issue, and the issue is that it makes the sight posts taller, higher. Okay, if you compare, if this barrel is even, this insert for the barrel is even, this sight is lower by 4 millimeter, this is higher. And that is because of this charging tube is a lot thicker. So that's the first issue. The height of the post changes, and there's a difference of 4 millimeter. Now looking at the rear sight, this is from the 16. It's a really cheap sight. It's a single aperture, and it is horizontal adjusted on the side, and there's no protection of the aperture. So should you drop this on the ground, you're more likely to break this easily, and that's why they included a spare with the rifle. Now this is from an airsoft. It's a drum sight. It cost about $10 US. You can find some cheaper at $6, but this one is quite nice. It's a steel drum with an alloy base. Now it has 4 apertures. The large one is marked 4, and then as it goes lower, 3, 2, 1, which is kind of weird because you would think the large aperture is for the closest distance, and that should be 1. And as you go further out, the number should increase to 2, 3, and 4. But this is kind of reversed. I also noticed that all the aperture, the center of the aperture, is at the same level. So what increases the distance is as you turn this from a 4 to a 3, it actually unscrews and goes higher, and that's how you increase the distance. you can see that as I'm changing the aperture size from a 4 to a 3, the gap between the drum and the base is starting to increase. You see that? Yeah. And now so that's how it basically works. Now, when I put these two, if I mount them at the same level, I'm going to be faced with a second issue. And the issue is the center of these aperture is 1 millimeter taller than this center of this aperture. So this is 1 millimeter, the back sight is 1 millimeter higher, and the front sight is 4 millimeter higher. So that's like 5 millimeter difference. So, and when I mount this onto the rifle, I'm pretty darn close to the bottom already. Like if I mount it here, I'm within about 3 millimeter from the top of the receiver. So, but I'm 5 millimeter off. So I can't see myself cutting 2 millimeter into the receiver. So I have a mounting issue that I need to solve regarding this drum rear sight. How do I mount this? Do I mount this like this? Or do I go over like this and cut a channel so this piece can go in? Or do it for the back? That is, I have to make a decision on that. But first, let me take this drum sight apart and show you what it looks like. Okay, there's a screw at the bottom. I just unscrew it. And then the steel drum comes up, and that's the alloy base. Be careful when you remove this, because there's a hole on the inside. Okay, look at that. There's a square end of a screw, and you have to unscrew the center from the drum, like that. And be careful when you do that, because the center screw has a hole in it, and it contains a spring, which I lost, and it also has a tiny steel ball, which I can't even pick up with my fingers. Okay, I'm having a hard time picking this steel ball up, but I want to show you what it looks like. Here it is. Right there. It's a tiny little steel ball, and it goes into the side right there. Right there. The spring goes in first, and then the ball. What it does, it holds the drum at each of these distance. And there's a groove inside the drum. Don't know if you can see it, but that's where the steel ball rests on, and that's where it holds the aperture. So there's 4 grooves for 4 different distance. And this is the rest of the drum. This is the center screw, as you can see. The bottom of the screw is square, and it sits right at the base like this. Okay. Okay, so here's the problem. I have a 5 millimeter difference, and I have to make a decision how to mount this. There's no, obviously, if I just mount this straight on this rail mount, I would be 5 millimeter too high. Okay, that basically means I'll be shooting quite high. 5 millimeters is a lot. So I have to find a way to lower this down by, well, I prefer not to cut into the mount. So what I'm going to try to do is two issues I'm faced with: how to lower my sight, which is 5mm too high, and how to mount this onto this. How do I approach? Do I cut a channel, or do I just screw this in like this? So those are the issues I'm faced with. And I have decided what I want to do to solve the first let me solve the 5mm that's too high. I've decided, I found a way to do it. And the way to do it is, funny enough, you notice this, you're supposed to aim at the back of this drum, okay, because and it looks through from the middle of the drum to the front. Funny enough, if I turn this, the largest aperture, to the front, well, I won't be able to see it because it's blocked. There's no big hole in the back of the drum to see through the front of the drum. And made worse, because this screw is in the way. Even at its lowest point, you still can't see it. And when I made some measurements, funny enough, when I made some measurements, when this is mounted on the base, with the angle, the difference in the elevation is exactly 5mm. So I was thinking, what if I were just to aim through the front of the large aperture, drill a bigger hole in the back, and get rid of this center screw, I would then solve my first issue of lowering this down by 5mm. And this is what I did. I went to my hardware store and I got a stainless steel screw, number 10, with a 32 thread, and this is what it looks like, with a skinny washer. Don't get a fat washer, okay, get a thin washer. Here's a 1/2 inch stainless steel number 10 screw with a 32 thread nut. So this is what I did. I put this washer in first. I dropped the screw in, and also chose a screw that is triangular. It's a triangular shape, flat head, and the reason why is because obviously I'm not going to be able to match the washer hole, and as it turned out, it's bigger, and that's fine because this is triangular. It's always going to be centered, and so I'm going to slide that in. And this number 10 size is pretty close to that hole in the bottom, so it's going to be like that. And I'm going to move the large aperture to the front instead of the back, and now I'm going to screw this nut in. Okay, so here it is. Okay. Now, the reason why you're also choosing a skinny rather than a thick washer is that it'll also act like a locking washer. You know, it'll be some tension to it. So there you are. Here it is. The big aperture is now facing the front. All I need to do is make a bigger hole in the back and see how much lower this is compared to if I left the screw in the middle. Remember, this is a 22. I would not be doing this if it's a 9mm because I'll need the distance. I'll be losing the distance. But the fact is that the 22 has only one range, right? It's only set for one range. Of course, you need to match that with this, also set it for one range, and I would be using the largest hole, which is the same size as this hole, and I'll set that in the front. All I need to do is drill a bigger hole in the back so I can see through, right through. And like I said, the difference in just changing the aperture from the back to the front is exactly 5 millimeter. And I could also use this drum as a fine tune. I can just, like for horizontal, I can just adjust a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, not too much, and then I will be gluing this nut to the bottom, so I can just adjust it from the top without having the nut in the bottom move on me. Of course, I can also, when I screw this in to the rifle, I can also use this to do major, this screw will do a major horizontal movement, but the finer one, I'll just use the drum. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make that modification, and I'll be back. Hey, I'm back, and I have successfully modified and installed a drum sight. I also installed a mini claw rail. I hacked a rail delete, and I mounted my red dot Bushnell TRS 25. So take a look at that. Doesn't this look fantastic? Okay, what I'm going to do is remove the red dot first, and then I'll disassemble and show you what I've done close up. Okay, let's talk about the claw rail. I got this from AliExpress for $4 US. I originally bought this for my STG-44, and it also fits my GSG-16. Now, I also bought another claw rail for my STG-44. It's a Tapco brand. But this does not fit, and that's because the top part here is rounded. You need to get the square and square type. So I'll show you what that looks like. To remove this, it's a little tricky. You have to unscrew one side first. Completely unscrew one side. Like remove the whole screw. Otherwise, it'll be a little difficult to put it in. Here, I'm going to remove the right side. Okay. And then tilt to the left. And to install it, you would do the reverse, but you would loosen these ones first. Where it is. These screws, just loosen them up before you put them on. And then come across to the right, and then put the screw in. $4 US from AliExpress. Okay, I hacked a rail delete, and I'll show you a video on how I did that. This is from a 1.5 inch ABS ABS pipe, and it's out of this. This I deliberately made this 181 millimeter long. Because I'm going to try to use this to make a handguard out of it, but what I needed first was to cut a strip off for the rail delete. And now when you cut this, try to cut, this is the same length, try to cut 1 millimeter wider so you can file it and make it fit exactly, and the top should be flush, otherwise your claw rail won't fit. And the claw rail is, like I said, the top part here is squared off and it sits right on the mount. And matter of fact, I don't even have to screw this rail delete down. It's held in place by the claw rail. Okay, next I'm going to remove the drum sight, and there's a screw, and this is the screw that actually came from the trunnion, the spare screw, and it holds the drum sight down. Okay, and just I have to wiggle this up. There it is. I'm going to show you exactly what I did. This part I cut and filed. I left the back end exactly the same width as it's in this groove, which fits right in like this, like that. I know there's a little gap between the receiver and the base of the drum sight, but that's okay. I'm going to be able. I'll fill this in later with ABS, and that is now I'll explain why I went this far back. Now I could have done it closer to the front, but I decided to go to the back as one. It's easier to cut this. All I have to do is, well, take care of one side, but if I set this forward, then I have to cut two sides, and that would be a little tricky. Also, I want to, for some people and myself, I also wanted to reuse the existing rail that was there. So if I were to put this sight back, I can actually reuse the existing rail. See that? See, that's also an option. If I don't want to use the claw rail, I can use the existing rail. Also, a friend of mine visited me over the holidays, and he left me a rail delete that he bought from the forum, like this. It's made by a 3D printer, and that too will also fit. See, it'll fit right in there. So you don't have to throw it away if you bought it, because he originally bought it for this. It's the originally rail delete right there, but now he has conversion kit front sight, and so he thought this was no use. But like I said, I designed this set far back that you can reuse this, or you could use one of these rails. It'll fit perfectly. So, but if you don't have a 3D printer and you don't want to use one of these, and you want to use a mini claw rail, then you have to hack a rail delete like this. Oh, let me remove this and show you exactly how I solved that rise of 5mm. Okay, you're supposed to originally view this sight from the back of the drum. This bigger hole was supposed to be back here, but the difference between the front and the back is 5mm, and so to solve the rise of 5mm, I moved that hole, number 4, to the front, and then I drilled a 1/4-inch hole in the back, so now I can actually see right through this larger hole that I drilled, right through the number 4 hole. It works, trust me. But of course, I had to remove that screw that was in here because it was too high. The screw is in this bag right here. I had to remove this and replace it with the stainless steel screw and nut. It's a number 10 and a 32 thread. Please don't use a thick washer, use a thin washer, because it acts like a locking washer. So there you go. It's set for one distance, and that's where it's going to stay. But that's it. That's how you modify and install a drum MP5 sight onto your GSG-16, and also how to install a mini claw rail, and how to hack a rail delete. So, thank you for joining me, and please subscribe. To make a rail delete, if you don't have a 3D printer to make a rail delete, then you can hack one out of an 1.5" ABS pipe. Cut it 181 millimeter, longer than the rail, and I'll explain why later. Use a large tube cutter, 181 millimeter, and place it on the vise, and use the vise as a guide, and basically just cut a straight line out of it. Once you got the groove going, then you can straighten it out, and then cut the remaining. You're hacking a rail delete out of this ABS pipe. Now, I like to not waste the remaining U-shape of the pipe, so I'm going to try to make an SD handguard out of that. But this strip is your hacked rail delete. So I'll show you how it fits on the rifle.